Hello and welcome to Hall's Wine Guide. I don't know which platform you're watching on, and I'm just going to spend a little while introducing myself and introduce what we're doing as other platforms come live. Because here at Hall's Wine Guide, we are sharing our passion for wine. We're sharing some tastings of various wines. This is what we're going to do. I'm not a professional wine person. I'm an amateur who loves wine and has been enjoying wine for decades. And what we're going to do on these live streams is explore some of that, share some of my love and passion for wine, take questions and share some social media chat with you. And as we've started going live, we'll be adding new platforms. So whether you're watching us on Twitter, whether you're watching us on Facebook, whether you're watching us on Instagram, whether you're watching us on TikTok, whether you're watching us on YouTube, there are different streams going out live. And we're doing this from our live streaming centre here in Bristol. This is a great chance for us to experiment with the magic of this technology and for me to share some of my passion for wines. And of course, being in Bristol is not mad either from a TV point of view, because technology and broadcasting has a long history in Bristol, but also the wine industry has a long history here, because Bristol was one of the major ports for importing wine when wine was brought to the UK rather than made here in large volumes. And we'll come on to the English winemaking and English and Welsh winemaking later on in this live stream. So, I believe we're now live on quite a lot of platforms. I have Chris in the gallery talking in my ear. He's going to be helping guide the production today. And I'm going to start opening some wine and talking through what we've got. Now, I've got 5 wines, so we're going to be here for a little while today. And as we work through, we'll talk about the wines, where they're from, and where that sparks a different story or a different idea, I may ramble off in a different direction. Those of you who know me as friends will know that I can talk about wine for hours, and that's exactly what I intend to do. If you are new to seeing me talk about wine, then I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to jump on to any of the social media accounts. If you could like, subscribe, please feel free to do that, and certainly come with any comments or questions, and they will get fed to me here in the studio. So we're going to start with our first wine today, and that is here. This is there we go, I'm popping that down there. Now, that's getting that perfect there for our label cam. There we go. We need a nice graphic for that, don't we? Label cam, label cam. Lovely. So here we are. This is agave. Now, we're a wine here now from Italy, from the Piedmont area of Italy. So if you flew into Milan and you took the road down to Genoa, for example, you'd be driving through this area of Italy. I've done that drive quite a lot, heading, I have to say, not to Gavi, but to Alba, the home of the white truffle, which is also another wonderful winemaking area. But we've got agave here, and I picked this up yesterday at Morrisons, and it was on discount. So this bottle was £8, discounted, I think, from £9.50. Agave is made from a grape called Cortese. And that's an Italian grape that's pretty special. There are a few other places that grow it in small volumes, but this wine is largely grown in Piedmont. And you'll often see, and I'm often asked this question actually when we're out in restaurants, where you see Gavi on a wine list, because there's Gavi, and you'll also often see Gavi di Gavi on a wine list. And people often say, well, what's the difference between agave and agave di Gavi? Well, Gavi is the town in the middle of the winemaking area that grows Cortese to make the Gavi wine. So you've got wines that are from the wider area around the town of Gavi, which are just labelled Gavi. And you've got the ones that are from Gavi itself within that area, which are called Gavi di Gavi. There are slightly different characteristics to different parts of the wine. And there we go, lovely. So that's what we're going to taste. It's the first wine here. It looked to me to be quite a good deal, I thought, in Morrisons. This is the first Morrisons wine we've tried. And we'll talk through a little bit now about how we taste the wines. So obviously we need a glass. That's vital to wine tasting. But there's a kind of process, a procedure of tasting a wine, and we'll work our way through that with each of these wines, probably with a bit less authority each time we do it. So I'm going to pop this wine here. There we go. Now you should have that in a slightly wider shot now. Let's get that right for you. And you've got my reading glasses just there. Let me move those out of the way. As we start looking at the labels, I will need my reading glasses again. So I keep these close to me all the time. Got to have the reading glasses. I'm good with the stuff on the big screens, but the stuff close up, no, these eyes are too old now. So what are we going to do with the wine? Well, obviously the first thing we'll do is open it. And then we will pour some into a glass and have a look at it. So there's a series of stages as we're going to go through the tasting, and we'll do this with each of the wines. So we will open the wine, we will have a little bit in the glass, and then we will have a look at it. We'll be looking at the colour, we'll be looking how rich the wine looks, we'll be starting to get ourselves some clues about the type of wine that we've got in the glass. Then we'll get our nose right into the glass. You can see I've got some decent sized glasses here. These are bought in Sainsbury's. These aren't expensive crystal glasses. These are Sainsbury's wine glasses. So we will, I think they have the Habitat range in Sainsbury's. I think these are the ones I picked up last week. So we will have a look at the wine. We will then get our nose into the wine. And at that point, we will be able to start tasting the wine. So we will go through those stages of look, nose, how it smells, and then we will start to taste the wine. And that's how we'll start to get an idea of whether or not we like this wine and what sort of qualities we have for it. So here it is. I'm going to open this now. Ooh, listen to the cork. So people say, is a better wine, does a better wine have a cork? And I think that's a really interesting question now, because of course, you know, we see wines that have corks and wines that don't. And actually these metal caps are incredibly reliable, So these caps mean that you don't get air in the wine, and that's what we're trying to avoid. What we're trying to avoid is it getting oxygenated, turning into vinegar. That's, you know, incredibly important. Now, corks are not as reliable as you would like them to be. So once you've got a cork in there, you have, particularly if you leave a bottle upright, the ability for the cork to dry out and for air to get into the wine and spoil it. These metal caps don't do that. So it's easy to feel snobbish because a lot of very expensive wines have corks in them, but the reality is that this is an extremely good seal for a wine. Also, particularly if you're not going to drink the whole bottle at one go, having one of these is quite a reliable way of closing the bottle back up and popping it in the fridge. So there's the cap. We don't need to smell that though, like a cork in a posh restaurant, because it's a metal wine cap. Now, here we are. Let's have a little look at this. And when you look at a wine and it's just one wine, it's fine really, and often in a restaurant you might have a white tablecloth to go against. Here I've got some white paper though on the table here. If we go to a wide, you'll be able to see the shot that I've got here. In the corner of the desk here, I have some white paper. Now, if you're tasting wine at home, you might want to take a piece of white paper from the printer, hold the wine up against it, because once you can look through the wine to the white paper, you can see the shot there, you can start to get a much clearer idea of the colour. And once you've got several wines, that means that you're in a much stronger position to compare one wine with another. Now, if you're only tasting one wine, then it's obviously not so important because you're not trying to do a comparison. But also, a lot of restaurants, of course, have white tablecloths. So again, if you just pop it down beneath you, so you're looking down, and put the tablecloth behind it, you can see the colour. And that will start to tell you how rich, how intense, how ripe that wine is. Now, in this case, we've got quite a nice light colour. It's very difficult for me to do particularly accurate colours here, because although you can see the virtual set around me, for me, I'm in a green room. But nonetheless, I think there is a green note to this colour. And now I'm going to start getting my nose into this wine and finding out what this Garvey has to say for itself. This is a very fresh wine. This is delicious. Just the nose. I've got some of the richer fruits here. I've got some quite distinct pear notes actually coming through to me on this. It's interesting, you know, when you're tasting wines, you know, or you're reading tasting notes on wines, you'll see lots of different fruit described, and unless you're used to smelling lots of fruit, those are slightly difficult sometimes to understand or compare. But if you start to think about the fruits you know and understand, and think of those in your own notes, then it becomes again easier to compare one wine with another. So here I've got some a little bit of tinned peach, some crushed pear. I've got notes in that space. So heading slightly towards tropical, richer flavors, but not, I haven't got sort of pineapple, banana, I haven't got those super rich notes. But I'm not getting the very astringent end of fruits either. So, you know, I'm expecting to get a nice balanced mid-palate wine from that nose. And I think I'm going to have a taste now and see what we think. Now, you probably heard me slurping a bit there while I had the wine in my mouth. What I'm trying to do when I'm tasting a wine is to get some air in there, and it's the air mixed with the wine that helps to bring all those flavors out so that you get to taste the wine. One of the interesting things about this grape is that it is unusually balanced with both acid and fruit. It's a grape that is quite distinctive to this area in its ability to ripen. This, for me, is a nice round polished wine. We often talk about a finish on a wine. So how long does that flavor last? Some wines are kind of a snap and they're gone. This wine isn't. This wine has got a nice length. I can still taste that wine now, actually. So that's working extremely nicely. I think this at £8.50, was £8, was not a bad price. Is it an outstanding example of agave? Might be a little on the acidic side, but that nice fresh acid from an Italian wine is quite appealing. It might not be a pure drinking wine. This might be something that would sit really nicely alongside some seafood, perhaps. I can see myself enjoying this hugely with prawns in a rich sauce of some sort. This has got enough going on there to cut right through that. Maybe some prawns in a pasta. Yeah, you know, something on those lines would be absolutely sensational with this wine. So just, So that's lovely. Thanks very much if you're joining us on any of the platforms. Feel free to comment. We'll get those comments. And hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and comment. We're going live now on, I think, nearly 20 platforms. I'd like to say hi to Kieran Ben. Thank you, Kieran. I think you're watching on Instagram. That's good to know. Feel free to tell your friends to come and join us as we start going on to our next wine. So enjoy the social media platforms. But you'll have a tough time enjoying them as much as I'm going to enjoy this one, the next wine. So this wine, let me pop that here. I'll move that out of the way. I'm going to our famous label cam. Here we are. Let me know when we've got that. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. And there we are. There's label cam. Perfect. So this is another wine from Morrisons, from my trip yesterday to Morrisons in Banbury. It's another one of what they describe as the best range. So I think there's the label just there. Yeah. So this is a wine, obviously, that they're proud of. It was also on a little bit of a discount when I picked it up. And it's Chenin Blanc. And I thought, well, that'd be interesting because we can have a little chat about Chenin Blanc, because that introduces a mix of an old world grape with a new world story. So that's what we're going to have a little chat about now. So Chenin Blanc is a grape from France. It's a traditional grape from the Loire Valley. Not particularly fine or famous grape in France. It makes some sparkling wines. It makes Vouvray, for example. It makes some interesting wines. Hi to Jamie. See you're watching on Hall's Wine Guide on Facebook. That's great. Shout out. I think you've got Shelley watching with you. Hi, Shelley. So here we are. We've got our Chenin Blanc. So Chenin Blanc, the grape from the Loire Valley in France. But many years ago, it was taken to South Africa. And this grape, which is an okay grape and was used as a bit of a blending grape in quite a lot of places, turned out in the terroir of South Africa to be an outstanding grape, and it became the dominant white grape variety in South Africa. And this is a South African Chenin Blanc. So whilst it's a very flexible grape, as a grape that's grown as a pure varietal on its own with strong characteristics, that's a relatively modern development, actually, even in some of the French appellations that use it. But here in, so Josh Rom's just messaged to ask if the Chenin Blanc is sour. So I'll be back with you, Joshua, to let you know, because as you can probably see, if we go back to label cam, I haven't opened it yet. Here we go, there we go, look. Haven't opened it yet, but as soon as we do, I'll be right back with you on that. Here we go. So I'm just going to pop that over ready here for opening. So we're going to put the Chenin Blanc here. There you go. And now let's move this glass, because this glass has the Gavi in it, and we'll be getting a new glass now for the Chenin Blanc. So we were talking a bit about Chenin. So it's the dominant white grape of South Africa. It makes some outstanding wines. I think it's a delicious grape, and it's a really interesting example of how grapes traveled, and they started traveling a long time ago. If we go back to prehistory, of course, the Romans took grapes around, but the Romans had brought the grapes from Turkey, or perhaps even further east into Georgia and areas like that. So the grape moved, the grape varieties moved, but once they found their home in Europe, they started breeding grapes, getting new varieties of grapes, and that started to get grapes which were really well adapted to the particular areas in which they grew. And over 1,000, 2,000 years, we started getting grapes which are unique to Slovenia, to Hungary, to France, to Spain, to Italy, to Malta. Everywhere starts having its own varieties, because lots of those varieties of grapes are actually related to each other. And it's only recently, as we've started having DNA testing and gene understanding, that people have been able to go back and say, it turns out this grape is related to that one, or this grape is related to that one. So actually grapes have family trees as well. And that's particularly relevant in the case of Chenin Blanc. So here we have a grape that has traveled from France to South Africa and found a new home for itself. You can say the same, for example, with Malbec, the red wine grape, which is now the dominant red grape and the characteristic red grape of Argentina, for example. So quite often, these varieties which started in a European homeland have now found new places to be made. And as new world winemaking styles, and we might talk a bit about how wine's made in a moment in respect to this, but as those new world styles of winemaking have emerged, some of these grapes that were thought of as quite pedestrian filler varieties originally in Europe have actually become hugely successful grapes with characteristics all of their own. And of course, now going full circle from that, French winemakers, particularly in the south, have now started adopting, or have started over the last 15, 20 years, adopting quite a lot of those new world styles, both of winemaking and of grapes. So you've seen some grapes like this that have traveled from the Loire Valley in France, that have become the predominant white grape in South Africa, now seeing Chenin Blancs made in France that are made in the same style and with the same style of winemaking. And let's just maybe talk about what that is for a second, because wines originally, before refrigeration, before temperature and climate control, wines were all made at the ambient temperature. And of course that can be hugely variable, just like we've had this spring. 1 minute it's summer, 1 minute it's not. It changes. Now, once you go into trying to make your wine ferment, it's hugely significant, because if it gets too hot, it will ferment much harder and much faster, get a much higher level of alcohol, and it will lose quite a lot of sophisticated flavors. So back before the 1970s, wines from hotter countries, South Africa and Australia being good examples, had wine that had become, that the fermentation was often too intense, the alcohol level was too high, and the flavors were not particularly attractive. But technology that was largely invented by the Mondavis in California, but lots of other people contributed to it too, started different types of controlling the temperature of the fermentation. So once you started to have a huge steel vessel, for example, to ferment your wine in, so we're talking, you know, vast tanks, 2-3 times the height of this studio, towers of steel, that those steel towers are double jacketed, and you can run water around the side of the jacket. So that means you can very precisely control the temperature of the fermentation. And that means even in warmer climates, you can make a style of wine which is much better managed and much more consistent from year to year. So that type of fermentation, instead of old concrete tanks out of barrels or fermenting in barrels, these are wines that are made very carefully, monitored throughout their life in the fermentation process, and then subsequently in the barrel if you want to add some of the characteristics of a barrel to the wine. So those techniques were developed in the New World, while France, in large part, was getting a little bit behind in the 80s, perhaps into the 90s. But then seeing the success of that consistent style of New World winemaking, you start to see those techniques growing in popularity in France. So, now, here we go. Let's do our next wine. So, here we go. I'm going to just pop the Gavi over here. I don't want to get these muddled up, otherwise I'll have to do my own blind tasting. So here we go. There we go. Just getting that in the right place for you. Can you guys see that? Lovely. Here we go. So I'm smelling the metal cap. It smells fine. And now I'm going to pour a little bit of the Chenin Blanc. Hi, Louise. I think you're watching on the Disrupt Your Instagram site or account. Welcome. She asked, do I prefer Italian or English? I think it depends what you're talking about, Louise. We'll come back to that. So let's have a little look at the colour. Now, the lovely advantage, of course, of doing a tasting as I'm doing now is that I've already got a glass of the previous wine I looked at. So I can compare the two. That's interesting. So this Chenin Blanc is definitely, you're going to find it very difficult to judge this. So just find a way whether you possibly can here. Trying to give you a shot of that. Yeah, it's going to be quite hard, isn't it? But yeah, if I do that, if I put them here, let's see, yeah, if we use the label cam, there we go, if you get a shot. So this wine here is the Gavi. I'm not sure if you can see, but it is a little bit paler than the Chenin Blanc. So I'm immediately expecting, my brain is already saying to me, I'm expecting this to be a little bit richer, a little bit more rounded, perhaps a little more qualities of some aging in it. I may be completely wrong about that, but all the time we're going through that step-by-step process, we're trying to give ourselves a few clues. That's the Gavi. I'll pop that out of the way there, and I'm going to now taste. Well, first of all, I'm going to get my nose in, of course. Oh, and I've immediately got some tropical fruits on this one. I've got maybe lychee or litchi, some people call them, don't they? I'm going to go with lychee for this. Interesting. So that's a much riper style of wine than I was expecting. From the colour, it's got a lovely rounded nose. It's very distinctly different from this Gavi. Yeah, perhaps a bit of melon maybe there. Okay. So that's also quite a fresh, light style of wine. It doesn't have the same long kick of acid that the Gavi had. So this, if you're looking for a wine to drink this evening in the garden, or sitting outside on a balcony, or sitting at home in front of the telly, frankly, this is a good option. This Chenin Blanc, let's just put that label in the right direction for you there. So this bottle here, which is from Morrisons, it's from their The Best range, and it's a South African Chenin Blanc. It's got enough weight to justify the extra 2 or 3 quid over the bog standard cheapest wines you can find in the supermarket. So the wines I've got here, they're going to cost you a little bit extra. They're not the £5–6 wines, they're the £8 wines. And I guess what this tasting is in part trying to do is see whether or not that was worth the extra 3 quid. And actually in both these cases, I think it was. They both got something to say. The Gavi Probably need something to eat to go with it. It's got, unless you like an acidic style of wine, unless you're a Sauvignon lover, in which case you'll lap that up. But if you tend towards a rounder style of wine, then this Chenin is probably the one for you. And I can see myself now sitting in the garden drinking this. I'll take the bottle home with me after this. Okay, so those are two English wine. Those are the two wines we've had: the South African and the Italian from Piedmont. And for our third still white wine today, table wine, we are going to go to England. So it gives us a chance to talk a little bit about English wine, English and Welsh winemaking. It's exciting, it's dynamic, and we're going to move ourselves into talking now about English wine. We've got a still wine, and then we've got a couple of sparkling wines. So we've got lots of stuff to talk about with English wine. If you've got any questions about English wine, please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll try and answer your questions. Although, as we said, if you've joined the streams more recently, I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. I'm not a professional wine person. I'm a TV guy who likes to talk about wine. And what I'm doing here is sharing some of my passion and enthusiasm for wine with you, and we're doing it now on, I think, 20 different social media streams, accounts. So please enjoy this, and now I'm going to start talking about English wine. So, who started making English wine? Well, probably the Romans. We've been making wine here for a very long time. But of course, over the 2,000 years since the Romans arrived, winemaking dropped off. There was wine being made, but England became a beer country, as did Wales. But there was always a little bit of winemaking, and what became in the sort of post-war years, 60s and 70s, a bit of a hobby business for some landowners to plant a bit of a vineyard and try some grapes, became, through the 80s and 90s, a much more significant undertaking, and more vineyards popped up, and larger vineyards popped up. And the other thing that changed is that instead of just picking some vines and sticking them in a field, people started to use the science of viticulture, of growing grapes, by studying the ground, studying the terroir, working out which grapes would be best. And of course, when we use these names like Chenin Blanc or Garvey or Cortési, the grape that's in Garvey, there isn't one version of any of those. There are lots of clones of those grapes too. So once you start thinking about, the vineyard behind me here, what grapes are you going to plant there? You need to study precisely the geology of what's going on there, the meteorology of what happens on that particular slope, how much sun it gets, how much rain it gets, when the grapes are likely to ripen in that location, when it's going to flower, because that's, if you get the frost on it, it's a bit of a disaster. So you're trying to match all of these qualities, both of the grape and the land, to make a great vineyard and to make a great wine. And a lot of those early vineyards were slightly more randomly located, but some of the newer ones are outstandingly located, and the choice of vines, the choice of clones, and the quality of the winemaking has gone through the roof, to the extent, and I have a secret for you to hold on till the end, but what I have here is a sparkling white wine. I'm just going to pop this here so you can have a little look. Look at that. So this is going to be our last wine. This is a Pommery. This is a champagne style of wine made in the champagne method, but from an English vineyard in Hampshire. So let me go back to pop that back. We'll be coming back to that later. But yes, here we have a Pommery champagne style. It isn't champagne because it's not from Champagne, but made by Pommery. And there are other, even Taittinger have been investing in vineyards. We're still waiting to see what the Taittinger champagne or English sparkling wine looks like. So now we're going to go, before we go to those sparkling wines, we're going to go to the Woodchester Valley single estate Cotswold wine. So I'm going to pop that here. Let's get that. So we're on label cam. Let me just pop these out of the way for a sec, so you get a clear view of that. Now, I picked that up today when I was on the M5 driving down to the studios here in Bristol. And there's a great service station at Gloucester, which is a farm shop as well as a service station. I think they have another one up in Scotland or on the border just in Cumbria. Fantastic. It's a wonderful farm shop, great food, fantastic sausage rolls, but they also sell a lot of local produce, in particular wine. There's lots of great ciders in there as well. So I stopped there and I picked this up. So this isn't a wine I know much about, so I'm going to work my way through learning about it with you. As we go through that, I'm going to read the label with you as well. So we're going to learn about this wine together. So I'm popping on my glasses. I'm saying hi to Joe DeMax. He's on the Hall's Wine Guide page, so that's great. And I shall now focus back on the wine. Yeah. So we are now going to read the label together. So this wine was made by Cotswolds, single estate, Woodchester Valley. It's the 2021 Culver Hill. It says on the label, delicious dry white blend. I'm not sure there's a regulated wine status called delicious, but we'll check that out ourselves a little bit later on. Established by the Shiner family in 2007, Woodchester Valley is an award-winning single estate vineyard. Nice, so this isn't, if any of you watched the last Hall's Wine Guide, we had some Lime Bay Winery, which buys grapes from different growers. This is a single estate wine, so all the grapes were grown by the vineyard who made this wine. Planted on the steep slopes of the beautiful South Cotswolds area of national beauty, so outstanding natural beauty. So I live in the Cotswolds, this wine is from the Cotswolds, so I'm hoping that this is going to be a marriage made in heaven. Our focus is on producing the very best quality still and sparkling wines. Oh, they've got sparkling as well. We'll come back to talk about the sparkling. I got distracted now. We'll carry on back on the sparkling in a minute. And it elegantly reflects their origins in the limestone soils of our vineyards. So limestone, I'm going to pop the wine back in the middle here for the label cam while we talk about that. So when people say wine producing in England, are you mad? We produce wine in France. Well, one thing that's slightly missing for people's understanding of that is so one of the things that's slightly, that we need to understand there is that the terroir, the soil that's in the south of England and the soil, the geology that's in northern France are not only similar, in some cases they're actually the same, because the ground in places goes down under the English Channel, the rocks, and comes back up the other side. So there are places with limestone that are the same in Dorset as they are in Chablis. There are places in Champagne that have very similar geology to the geology that we have in the south of England. So if you can find the right slopes, the right weather, the right sun, and plant the right clones of the right grapes, then the south of England should be an outstanding place to produce wine, because the geology is not different. What you need to find is somewhere, there are places in France where you need almost to protect grapes from the sun because there's so much, certainly some of the grapes that you grow in the north of France. So as we get these great long summers, wasn't one when I drove in, but as we get these great long summers that we're all being promised, we should be able to get even better and even better wines. So those types of wines and types of grapes that are very common in the north of France, so we're talking about Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, talking about the Chenin Blanc even from that we've talked about. Those are all types and styles of grape and wine that we should be able to make well here. So this is interesting. I think we've gone through what we have here. We've got our classic white Culver Hill, has fresh aromas and flavours of melon, apple and citrus fruits, which are beautifully balanced. Well, we'll judge that in a minute, won't we? The barrel fermented Ortega, that's interesting. We can talk about barrel fermentation now. Gives great structure and complexity. A delicious dry white wine with a clean, lingering finish. Well, so there are different ways that you can make wine. Quite a lot of wine in England, certainly in the 80s and 90s, was fermented in fiberglass fermentation vessels, which obviously have some dependence on the ambient temperature. But you've also now got a lot of steel fermentation, so people have invested in that to make higher quality wines. But some of the things that you want to do if you need to get, if you want to make a wine that has more rich complexity and more flavors, is to allow the wine to spend some time in contact with oak. And barrels is the traditional way of doing that. Now, there are methods of adding oak chips to try and get the oak flavor into wine as well. But the traditional method would be to take a proportion of your wine, and to age that or ferment it even in barrels. So you could have all of your wine clean and fresh and never touch any oak. You could take some of it after it's made and age it in oak and then blend it. Or you could take some of your must, your grape juice, and you could ferment it in an oak barrel and then blend it with some wine, either complete all of it or blend it with some wine or some grapes that haven't been. So we're going to get ready now to try and taste this. There are some 400 vineyards or so in the UK now, and they're in the south of England and in Wales. I don't think there are any in Scotland. If there are any in Scotland, please let me know by going to the social media comments on whichever platform you're watching. That's exactly what John Darval has done, who's watching on Disruptia's Instagram. So John Darval, I'm told I'm pronouncing the name wrongly. Sorry, John. So yeah, feel free to comment, make any questions. I think we're now on about 20 social media platforms. It's a great opportunity for us to test our technology here and for me to share some of my passion and enthusiasm for wine. So yeah, some 400 or so vineyards now across England and Wales, all different styles. And we've also got people investing now in much larger scale planting. So the science and the quality of English winemaking is going up year after year. So let me get myself a glass. Okay, and we will now taste the Woodchester Valley 2021 Culver Hill, which according to the label is a delicious dry white blend. So here we go. Oh, there we are. And let me just pour some into there. Those of you who've joined us, if you're thinking about these wonderful, expensive-looking glasses, just so you know, I picked them up in Sainsbury's last week. Quick shout-out now to Fergus Lawson, who I think is watching. Hello, Fergus. Thanks for joining us. I'm sorry to hear that. Right, here we go. So, let's go through the process of tasting this Woodchester Valley 2021 Culver Hill. So, English wines have been made with some lesser known grapes over the years. Ortega is one of them, Müller-Thurgau is another, Sauvignon Blanc is another. So taking a blend of grapes, and I think there's a blend in here, although the Ortega is presumably a significant part of it. This is a wine which has a decent acidity. It's a wine that has, I can't do that with my reading glasses on. Yeah, so let's look at the colour. We haven't looked at the colour. So you should have shouted that out. Someone should be saying that in comments. Ed, you said the first thing we do is look at the wine, and I've dived straight in here. So here we go. Let me just move that out of the way. We can start to compare this with the colours of the other wines. And I have to say all three are on the lighter end of the scale. So we've had the Gavi, we've had the Chenin Blanc, and now we're on the Woodchester Valley, which is the English wine. It's got a much sharper nose, maybe even gooseberries. There's some very green fruits here, green gages perhaps. I love it when people say green gages. Who's ever eaten a green gage? But it's a small green plum. It's got that kind of fresh stone fruit, small stone fruit acidity, which is lovely. There we go. So let me just... So it's a lighter style of wine, I can see that. And I've got those much fresher, greener fruit flavours on the nose. So let's... So the interesting thing about this wine is that whilst it's got that really forward acidic freshness that is coming from that green gage type flavour, what you have also got is a distinct roundness. And that fatty roundness, if you like, is what I think is coming from the barrel fermented Ortega in this wine. So actually, of the three wines, I think this is the most balanced wine. It's got a much rounder mouthfeel to it than the other two. This is an absolutely delicious wine. Of course, price-wise, because of the tax on wine produced in England, and the costs, I suppose, of producing wine in England, it's a more expensive wine. So this one's a bit more of a treat. I think this was $15.95 when I picked it up today. So this is, twice the price. And I think, I often, when I'm looking at the wines in the shop, I think, well, do I buy 2 bottles of something fairly cheap, or instead do we buy a bottle of something of a better quality and drink a little bit less between us? I'm sure you've probably had the same moments yourself in the shop. So I'm being asked now by Fergus, which is the strongest wine. That's a good comment. Let's have a look, shall we? So my own sense of the alcohol would have put the Chenin as the strongest, but we'll have a good look because that's a very good question. So let's start in the order we've tasted them. So the Gavi de Gavi, I have here 12.5% for the Gavi de Gavi. For the Chenin Blanc, 13%. And for the English wine that we're drinking now, 11.5%. So my palate hasn't deceived me there. So the English wine is the lighter style of wine. The Gavi de Gavi was the more acidic of the wines. The Chenin Blanc was a reasonably rounded wine. Would have been a better choice to go with food, but it is the higher alcohol wine of the three. So this English wine is a lower alcohol, but it is quite delicious. So those are the 3 still wines. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. Anything else you'd like to say or add, please feel free to do so. Please like and subscribe. This is a chance for us to test all of our technology here in our live streaming studios in Bristol. If you have a product or service you'd like to talk about in a studio like this, to talk to all of your people, get in touch with us, because we don't just talk about wine here. We can set you up and you can talk about whatever it is that you are passionate about as well. So thanks for sticking with me, because we're now going to move on to the exciting part of the day, which is the sparkling wines. So I'm just going to move this away over here. So this is all going back over here. Just bear with me going in and out of shot while I do this. I'm going to put those here. Yeah, let's get everything. We're having a bit of a reset, so if you just hold on while we do the reset, that I'm going to do first, that I'm going to do second. So I'm having a little reset there, that glass there. I'm going to move ready. I'm going to have those glasses ready here. I'm sure if this was a proper television program, we'd have a whole cast of people helping me sort all this out, but I'm going to do it all myself for you at home watching on your social media streaming accounts. So now here we are. Let's move on to the first of our sparkling wines. I'm going to put that here. Good go label can, please. There we go. Let me just get that nice and center for you there. There you are. So we're going to have a little talk about sparkling wine, shall we? So England, the south of the United Kingdom, is increasingly producing some outstanding sparkling wines. The terroirs we talked about a little bit earlier is very similar. So you've got limestone, you've got chalk, you've got very similar terroir as you have in the north of France, in Champagne. But you also have nice rolling hills with nice south-facing slopes that can help to get the grapes to ripen. So you've had the unusual development of the big French champagne houses starting to invest in growing grapes and winemaking in the south of England. And the last wine we're going to have is an example of that. But also, I think just before, a couple of years before COVID, the Taittinger Champagne House invested famously in some big vineyards which are growing, but I think have yet to produce at least a publicly released wine. But we're going to start to see more and more, and with Nye Timber and others, we've got award-winning champagne-style wines, and most British supermarkets have got examples of those now. This is from the Three Choirs vineyard, and it's a classic cuvée. It's a sparkling wine, it's an English sparkling wine. Let's have a look, as we like to do here on Hall's Wine Guide. Let's have a look at the label. There'll be lots of clues for us here. This is from Gloucestershire, Three Choirs. Of course, the Three Choirs are the three cathedrals there. So you have Gloucester, Hereford, and what's the other one? Three. Which have I missed out? There's Gloucester, Hereford. Someone tell me in the comments. I've missed out one of them. But there's three choirs from those three cathedrals. And this vineyard is one of the older vineyards, one of the more established vineyards in the UK. It was established in 1973. And so there's some decent, mature, both vines and winemaking experience and skill here. Not a great deal of information here. I think their website probably has a lot more. But what we can tell, in any case from the bottle, is that this was made using the traditional method. Now, the traditional method, it now says in a bottle, because saying the champagne method or méthode champenoise is not something that other countries and other winemaking areas can say now. So you used to see people describe a wine as being made in the champagne method or by the champagne method. They won't say, they'll just say the traditional method now. But that's what it means. And what that means is that this wine has effectively been made twice. It was made once as a still wine, and then it was made as a sparkling wine. So let's explain what happened. So in the same way that the three still wines that we had, that we've already tasted, were made, somebody took the grapes and made a white wine. So the grapes they will have used will be a mixture of three. There are only three grapes used in Champagne. Chardonnay, which is white, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, which you might think are red. But actually, if you peel the skin off a red grape, you'll find that the middle is not red. All the colour comes from the skins. So what you have here, and what you have in every champagne, is one, two, or three of those grapes, which have been crushed. The juice, without contact of the red skins, has been made into a still wine. That wine is then bottled in a bottle that has a big dimple in the bottom here, which, as you see, the still wines don't need to have. You've got that there? Here we go. Let's have a look at that. The big dimple in the bottom that you'll be used to from a champagne or sparkling wine bottle. And that has to be because and it's also got thicker glass on it. And the reason for that is that once the still wine goes in there, we're going to start to allow it with a little bit of yeast to ferment again with a metal cap on the top. So that will start to ferment, but this time the carbon dioxide won't bubble off. It will get trapped in the wine during that second fermentation. And that's how these wines are made, and that's how the sparkle comes into the wines. Now, of course, once you've started doing that, you have a problem. Two problems, really. One, there's no cork in it, because it's got a metal cap on the top. And number two, all the gunk from that second fermentation is still in the bottle. And no one wants to pour a glass of champagne and have all the fermentation gunk come out, the lees it's called. So what you need to do with the traditional champagne method is gradually over time turn these champagne bottles upside down. And this is going to make this fun when I open it in a minute. But so as you turn it down, all of the little gunk from the fermentation comes down into the neck of the bottle. So traditionally, that would be a manual process of taking off the metal cap, letting the let's put that there, letting the little bit of gunk come out and topping it back up with a little bit of liquor. And what goes in that, the dosage, is the big secret of most champagne makers. They won't tell you precisely what's gone in that, because that's the final finishing balance to the champagne. Now, of course, in reality now, that's not a mass production method. So actually, you'll see large crates of these bottles, all very slowly by computer being turned around over time. And then you can put the necks in brine, in super cold, salty water, and that will freeze the neck so that you can take out a little pellet of ice from each of them and then put the little dosage in, and then put the cork in. And that's how you make a champagne by the champagne method, or what we now have to call the traditional method. And that's how this wine was made. So we're now going to start having a taste of this first wine. So I'm seeing what else we can find out about it. Have I missed anything there? It's a classic cuvée, so I'm assuming it's the 3 grapes. And it's from 3 Quires in Gloucestershire. There's a 3quiresvineyards.co.uk. That's written 3-quires-vineyards.co.uk. So if anyone wants to find out more about the classic cuvée, I suspect the website will have more information. If there's something you think we need to talk about, because I can't do that and do this, then let me know in comments. So let's pop that there. There we go. Now, opening champagne. Everyone gets a little bit nervous about it, particularly when it's been out of the fridge and I've been shaking it around a bit. So what are we going to do? What we were trying to do is not pretend to be Lewis Hamilton at the end of a Formula One Grand Prix. That will get everyone in this studio very upset with me, and I'll make all the cameras and the technology that you can't see soaking wet with champagne. That won't work. So what you're trying to do, and what you always try to do with champagne or a sparkling wine, is to open it in a very careful, controlled way. Now, it may sound a bit rude, but I once had it described to me as it should sound like a nun farting. And that's because you should never hear that. Who would ever want to hear that? So you're trying to get it as quiet as you possibly can. So I'm going to now take off the foil. I've never done this on the telly before, so this could go horribly wrong. Actually, there is a story. I did cut my eye quite badly once on a bottle of Cava. Yeah, I was on a balcony showing off with it, and I wasn't really looking, and I was opening it like this and looking across the street, and the thing came up and caught the top of my eye, and I had blood pouring out of me years ago in Barcelona. Anyway, so we try not to do that. So here we go. So I've got the cap here. Yeah. So now, if we take this, I'm going to very gently twist this. Here we go. So I'm gently going to twist that. Here we go. Now I'm holding that in because I want that to stay and go quite as gentle. You ready to hear the nun fart? Oh, there she went. Great. Oh, here we go. So there's, I've got a little towel hidden down here for just this eventuality. So let me just sort that out. I'm going to pop that there, label cam. Let me get, I've lost my emergency towel, crew. Thank you very much. So there we go. So here we are. So despite the fact that it spent nearly an hour sitting in the warm here and it's been shaken and moved around by me, I think we didn't make too bad a job of that. Getting a little bit of champagne all over the place isn't really the end of the world anyway, is it? So here we are. We've got our 3 Quires Classic Cuvée. Thank you very much. Let me just dab that up. Here we go. Perfect. Pop that away down there. Right, so let's have a little look at this now, shall we? It's beautiful colour, lots of, obviously lots of sparkle. You can see lots of bubbles in that. There's a lot of discussion amongst champagne tasters about the nature of and the size of the bubbles, and whether you get a nice gentle sort of mousse or whether you get quite an aggressive fizziness to it. So these bubbles do look a little bit on the larger size to me, but again, we talked a lot about comparing wines today. For the next one, I have another glass, and we'll be able to look and see how different they are. Because clearly one thing that will have an impact on the way they look is the nature of the glass itself and the relationship between the wine and the glass. So I'm looking at that. It's still got plenty of fizz coming out of it. There we go. See that? I'll leave that there for a little bit so you can have a little good look at that. So can you see those? They're being picked up there by the lights in the studio beautifully, aren't they? You can see that. I mean, this is English wine from Gloucestershire, and if I passed you that glass, you would think you were drinking champagne, wouldn't you? So this is a classically made sparkling wine, and you're seeing more and more of these wines from England, and in some wine tasting competitions, they are beating some of the French champagnes. So this is, these aren't second-class wines by any stretch of the imagination now. So I look at the colour, it's a light style, but it's got a lovely golden, here we go. Here we go, let me see that. Can you see that? There we go. Trying to find a nice place for you to get a bit of a view of that. That's it, there. How about that? You can see that. So I've got a lovely golden colour here. And on the nose, am I getting... So the different sparkling wines that people buy, the Prosecco, the Cava, as well as Champagne, as well as English sparkling wines, they all have quite distinct... Let's pop this here so you've got a nice view of that. And... Let me move some of these bits and pieces to give you a nicer shot of the wine without my bits of rubbish. There we go, and my reading glasses. A little bit better. So, I'd be hard pressed to say that that wasn't champagne, you know. It's lacking a little bit, perhaps, of a forward acid note in it, but it's beautifully rounded. It's got quite a long finish. I've got I wouldn't say I've got tropical fruits there. I haven't got any sort of flavours of age with it. It's a very fresh style of sparkling wine. There's something a little bit Germanic maybe in the wine, in the grape taste there. I'm not quite sure what's in there, but it's not. It's not bad at all. Now that's made by an English vineyard with English winemakers, and for our last wine, we are going to try a very interesting development, which is the investment of Pommery, the wine house from Reims. Here we go. So have a look at this. So we're now seeing the name Pommery on an English sparkling wine. There we go. Let's pop that on the label cam so you can have a good look. There we go. Is that it? There we go. Look at that. That there. Was it? Got that nice? Perfect. So move that out of the way so you've just got a clear view of this. So what do we have here? What we have here is a sparkling wine, which is an investment from a champagne house in Champagne. And they are now beginning to produce their own English sparkling wine. And I think you're going to see more and more of this appear. There are various vineyards that have been invested in by champagne producers, and those are starting to produce bottles now. Because obviously it takes a few years after you plant a grape before you can start harvesting it. This is from Pommery. Pommery is one of the earliest champagne houses, and it's one of the champagne houses that was always quite creative at doing new things. So it was Madame Pommery who invented Brut champagne, the dry style of champagne. Champagne traditionally was a much sweeter drink, and of course we now generally all drink a dry style of champagne, and that was developed really for the English market in the 19th century, and it first came from Pommery, from Reims in the Champagne area. So to see them still at the cutting edge of doing something new is quite exciting. I've got a glass here, and let's compare. So we've gone from our wines in the tasting today. We've started in Italy with our Gavi from Morrisons. We've gone to the Chenin Blanc, also from Morrisons. We've then gone to an English wine, which we rather liked, from the Woodchester Valley, the Culver Hill wine, and we've now had an English wine, sparkling wine from Gloucestershire, and our final wine that we're going to taste now is this Pommery, which I'm going to open now. So here we go. Yeah, let me just open this. So let's get that, look at that. Let's move this over with the other wines now. There we go. The crew are looking forward to me finishing this live so that we can all have a taste. But at the moment, it's just me. And here we go. So we have this Pommery here. I'm going to do the same now. I'm going to very gently see if I can open this without too much drama. Remember, I've got the towel now, so we're going to be all right. Yeah, here we go. Can you hear her? Can you hear her? Ooh. It's just a little one. There we go. So let's pop that here. We're going to do label cam. Let me pour a little bit of this here. So there, oh, it's a much, much paler colour than the last one. That's interesting. Immediately much paler. I've got a touch of the pink in there, I think. So, right, there you are. You can have a little look. What I might just do is slide the other champagne in next to it so you can see whether you can get a sense of the colour. Does Label Cam pick those both up? There we go. There you go. So here we have our new one. So this is our, I wonder if I put a piece of white paper behind, that might help. No, it doesn't, does it? Here we go. So here's our last wine. So this is the Pommery English wine. And I'm going to have a little look at that. It's a little paler than our other champagne, but I have to say the bubbles are much smaller. Can you see that? Can I get that in close? Because that really is interesting. I'm just going to pour a little bit of the earlier wine into the glass so we can do a bit of a comparison. Okay, so let me just move that here. Let's do in right. There we go. Let's get this right center. So we're just going to get those so you can see. Now, I don't know how clearly you can see, but it's really visible for me that this one here, yeah, this glass has much larger bubbles than the new champagne that we've just poured, which is much, much finer. You can see on the top, actually, I can see as well, that I've got individual bubbles coming up on the first one, a little bit like a sort of fizzy drink, whereas I've got just a sort of mist almost of tiny bubbles on the Pommery, on the Louis Pommery English sparkling wine. So let's just move the previous one out of the way. Let's have a look. It's a much finer colour. Ooh. Let's put this back so you've got a sight of that while I have a taste. Now, I believe this is available in quite a few supermarkets. I picked it up today in Sainsbury's, but I think it's available in quite a few supermarkets. It's going to be quite new on the shelves because I think it was only in about 2017 or 2018 or something that they started this venture. So this may be, certainly the first time I've seen it, it may be its first year. I don't know, but let's have a... Okay, so it's not got the depth that I'd be looking for in a Pommery champagne. It's not got that at any age there, but you can tell it's heading in the right direction. If you prefer a lighter style of champagne, if you prefer a lighter sparkling wine, a summer garden sparkling wine, a party wine, then this is probably pretty good for you. If you're looking for some of those qualities, vanilla, oaky, richer, darker qualities that you'd be looking for in an older, more expensive champagne and a vintage champagne, and I think you may find this a little bit disappointing. In terms of richness of flavour, in terms of a rounded mouthfeel, then the Three Choirs Classic Cuvée certainly wins, I think, over this. But I think this might be even their first year in the bottle. Presumably over the next 5 years, 10 years, as those vines age, we'll get a slightly richer style of wine. But there's no flaws or faults in this wine. It's a delicious wine, and if a lighter style of sparkling wine is what you're after, then I think you'll find this is a very good option. And this one was from Sainsbury's. It's interesting, the label. I do wonder whether that's a good branding call, because it would take you a moment to realise that although it's got England written down there, you know, you see the Louis Pommery, you're not going to immediately think, oh, that's an English wine, are you? So I think there's maybe still some brand thinking to go through with that wine. But nothing wrong there. And once we've finished, we will share these wines with the crew that are working on the live stream here. And obviously you can try them at home. Lots of comments are welcome. And we'll see what everybody else thinks. But from my own point of view, we've had lots of fun here. We've had lots of fun checking out the technology. We had lots of fun with our label cam. More importantly, we've had lots of fun tasting a range of different wines and telling a few stories about wine and wine making. So we started with the Gavi, the wine made from Cortese in Piedmont. That was from Morrisons, perfectly nice wine. It was very fresh, had quite a more punchy acidity than I was expecting with it. Probably quite good against something like a prawn pasta, something of that sort, or rather like that. Felt it needed food to stand up against it. We've had the Chenin Blanc, the South African Chenin Blanc, the Loire grape that South Africa has made their own. That was a more rounded wine. I thought that would be a very good wine for drinking on your own, drinking on its own. Well, be perfectly good. I've been drinking it on my own. So, you could drink that. Would be great as a drinking wine to offer to have, if you're sitting in the garden having a nice bottle of something. Oh, this is a very nice wine. Certainly worth the extra £2 or £3 over if you're buying the cheapy to cheap wines in the supermarket. Worth that little bit extra. The quality was definitely there in that wine. We then tried the Woodchester Valley, the English white wine, which was a delicious, perfectly made wine. I'm just going to move my computer here because I think I might just be blocking the camera a little bit. Let's just drop those down there. Here we go. Let's drop some of these foil tops down. Let's give you a nice view of these wines here. There we go. That's probably a bit better for you, isn't it? I wonder if we could squeeze them all into the label cam. Let me see if we could do that. So you get to see all the wines that we've tasted today. Let me see, is that fitting in there? There we go, that's it. So you've got that. There we go. So you've got those. Don't know if we're going to get that. We might just get that in there. Perfect. I don't think will we get a fifth one in there? Maybe if I move that a little bit that way. Let's try and get them all in for you so you can see everything that we've tasted. So I was just wrapping up there with the wines that we've tasted today. Here we go. Look at that. We've got them all in there. Isn't that magic? Well done, Label Cam. So we've talked about the Gavi, which was the one that needed a little bit of food with it. We've talked about the Chenin Blanc, which I thought was a great drinking wine just to have on its own, or indeed on your own. We then tried the Woodchester Valley, which was the English white wine, an interesting and good wine from a growing and substantial vineyard with quite a lot of different wines and different grapes. Interesting blend there. That was the one that had the barrel fermented Ortega in it, so that gave a nice rounded quality to it. Of the three wines, I think that was clearly the most rounded of the wines. It was a very nicely made wine. The fact that it was an English wine did not make it second at all. In fact, I think it was probably the strongest of those wines. And then we had the two English sparkling wines. We had the Three Quires and we had the Louis Pommery. And of those, I think that the Three Quires is the strong winner. I'll just check myself on that. So, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a great opportunity for us to experiment with our live streaming technology and for me to share with you some of my passion for wine. I'm an enthusiastic amateur. I'm not a professional. I'm not selling you any of these wines. I'm picking up wines and taking a chance to talk about them and to talk about winemaking. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the various social media platforms. If there's anything wrong with anything you've seen in the streams, whether it's me talking about wine or anything technically with the streams, please add that in the comments too so that we know and that we can improve our output. It's been fantastic having this chance to talk to you about wine. We'll be back soon with the next Hall's Wine Guide. Thanks ever so much for watching. Goodbye.